So what's going on guys, Kate's here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the top 3 new best solo player builds in Albion Online. So for each and every single build I will show you what abilities and armor you want to get. Then I will explain every single skill and what is the best skill rotation that you want to use for both PvP and PvE. And then lastly I will show you the best gameplay, so you would be able to get the best results and highest damage possible and much more. So no matter how much silver you have or how high or low your weapon levels are, you can easily use these builds and follow the step-by-step guide. So if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So then moving over to the first solo player build, which are the paws. I personally have been playing this weapon for years now, and it is my most favorite one, because of its simple and easy playstyle. Then as well the ability to do damage within few seconds, and then lastly this build is good for chasing down enemies and as well for farming monsters. So like most of my builds, this setup is good for PvP and PvE, and most importantly, all skills and gear can be used with low levels and even tier 4 equipment. So then moving over to the build, and for the weapon we want to get the paws. So for your Q you pick the third option, then for your W you pick the second option, and then lastly for your passive you go with the deep cuts, which is the first option. Then for the helmet you want to use the fiend cowl and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for chest armor, go with the assassin's jacket and pick the third ability and third passive. Then for boots, go with the royal sandals and choose the third ability and second passive. Then for your cape, you pick the undead cape. And then lastly for your consumables, you go with the poison potions and dead water eels too. But then for alternatives, specifically for PvE, so if you don't care about killing players or escaping / chasing them down, then if you don't like the royal sandals, then you can just go with the scholar sandals. And this will give you the same speed boost, just without the increased damage. Then on the fiend cowl, if you're grinding experience, then you want to change to the first ability. So then when you are low on energy, you can regain it very quickly. And then lastly, for pure the highest damage possible, you can go with the pure damage cape, like a Tether cape, but even in PvE I don't like to die or even go down. So having the undead cape and assassin's jacket invisibilities are great for me to skip levels in dungeons, or just to escape if you ever get low health. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I will show you the best way to play this build. So for the first Q spell we have the Rending Rage, which has 3 attacks in one simple skill. So we can activate the skill once and it will do damage in AoE range. But then if we in the next few seconds we press it again, then we can now do the same attack twice now. And then again if we press the skill one more time, in the next 2 more seconds, then we will do damage plus leap to the enemies. So if in the third attack we hit the enemy, then we will root them for 2.4 seconds. But most importantly, we can do this combo without hitting anyone. So in open world, if you need to escape or catch enemies, then you can just simply press Q 3 times, and then the third time you will leap. So you can basically keep leaping around and creating distance, or just use it for AoE damage. Then for our W we have the Adrenaline Boost, which will give us a boost by increasing our damage by 25% and increasing our attack and movement speed by 40%. Then our E skill is the Razor Cut, which will do another leap and do massive AoE damage. Plus, if you hit enemies, all of them will bleed and take damage for the next 6 seconds. Then our R skill is a simple invisibility spell, which will make us invisible, and we can usually use it to escape enemies or skip enemy mobs in dungeons. Then for our D skill we have the Purge. This skill is mainly meant for PvP, and it will remove any type of buff on the enemy. It's very powerful for open world and 1v1s, but it's almost completely useless against mobs. So if you purely want to farm mobs, then here we usually pick the Energy Regain skill. And this is a simple channel spell, which each second you channel it, you will receive energy back, which is very important if you don't want to take small breaks, but keep farming from one enemy group to the next one. And then finally we have the F skill, which will give us 75% movement speed and increase our damage by 15%. The caveat is that we will take 13% extra damage when these boots are activated, so we usually only want to use them before using our main damage dealers or to escape enemies. And then of course we can't forget about the undead cape and consumables. So the cape will protect us that if we drop below 15% HP, we will become invisible. Then our stew will increase our damage and reduce cooldowns, so we can keep using our damage abilities more often. Then our poison potions is just meant as one extra thing we can throw at the enemy and do more damage. And then lastly, just in case, we have the cabbage soup. So no matter if you're in PvE or PvP, you can always run away for a second, then use the soup and regain your health in few seconds if you again don't get hit. But again, only use it if you're in real trouble, because these foods won't stack. So if you don't want your stew effect to disappear, then don't use the cabbage soup and only bring 1 or 2 for safety. So with all of this said, now let's move over to the rotation, and PvE and PvP basically work the same way. So then for your rotation at the beginning of the fight, you want to activate the Royal Sandals, then activate the W skill, and then from here just use your Q 3 times, and then finish it off with your E skill. And then from here keep on using auto attacks and the Q skill every 2 seconds, because they have very short cooldown. And then you can use your D skill if you see that the enemy has buffed up and is about to use skills, and then you can as well use the invisibility again to outplay the enemy, run away from him, or just to give yourself a break to reposition or regain the other skills back. R and D skills plus the poison potions are situational, so use them whenever you feel like you can get most out of them. So now let's see what we did in this rotation. By first of all activating the F and W skills, we will get plus 40% speed and plus 25 and plus 15% damage increase for the next 7 seconds. So then in those 7 seconds, we can use our main damage dealers, so the Q, W and E skills, and we will do massive amounts of damage. Then from here we just keep on using the Q skill, and if needed the poison potions, and from here, depending on if we are winning or losing against mobs or enemies, then like I said, we use the R and D skill accordingly, and that's about it. So in my final conclusions, if you're looking for, in my opinion, the most fun and one of the highest damage builds in Albion Online, then for sure try this one out and have fun. So then moving over to the second build, which is the Spear. This build is great for solo players because of its mobility, outplay potential, its pretty cheap build, and most importantly, it has very good damage for fighting in PvP or farming mobs. So again, you can use the setup starting with tier 4 equipment and pretty low levels in the Destiny board. So then moving over to the build, and for the weapon we want to go with the Spear. So for your Q, you pick the first option, then for your W, pick the third option, and then lastly for your passive, go with the Live Leech, which is the second option. Then for our offhand, we use the Torch, then for the helmet we want to get the Hunter's Hood, and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for chest armor, go with the Mage Robe and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for boots, go with the Soldier Boots and choose the second ability and second passive. Then for your cape, you pick the Tether cape, and then lastly for your consumables, you go with the Resistance Potion and Dead Water Eel Stew. But then for alternatives, specifically for open world ganking or general PvP, I would switch in the Soldier Boots to the third ability, which will give us longer speed boost. And then lastly for our Spear, specifically for the highest AoE damage, so for mob farming I would pick the first W skill. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I will show you the best way to play this build. So for the first Q spell we have the Lunging Strike, which is a basic attack that will stab the enemy in 9 meter range, and you can stack this attack 3 times, with each time increasing our auto attack damage and building up stacks. Then our second W skill is the Cripple, which is mainly meant for PvP, and this skill will do damage, purge all enemy movement skills, slow the enemy, and even give you 50% speed boost if you purge the enemy's speed. But if he wasn't using anything, then you can still do all the same things, except getting the speed boost in return. Then our E is Reckless Charge, which is a simple spell that will dash towards the enemy and do a bunch of damage. The more stacks you have, the higher damage you will do, and as you can throw the enemy in the air for 0.5 seconds, so you can cancel his spells if they have animation. So like I said, for the Q skill, you want to use it 3 times to get 3 stacks, and then only use the E skill. Then for our R skill we have the Purging Shield, which will give us a damage resistance, and if the enemy attacks us, all of his buffs will be removed. Then our D skill is called Retaliate, which when activating, we will reflect 85% of the enemy's damage. So for example, if he attacks you for 1000 damage, then you will get hit by only 150 damage, and he will basically hit himself for 850 damage. Then our F skill is just a simple movement speed increase ability that will increase our speed by 80%, and give us health regen for 5 seconds. And finally we have the Eels too, which will increase our damage and cooldown reduction. Then our resistance potions will give us resistance, so we will use it when we are about to take a lot of damage. And then lastly, we have the cabbage soup again in our inventory, so we can use it if we ever get in trouble. And as well, our Thetford cape will work in the background, that every few seconds we auto attack, it will do extra lightning damage. So with all of this said, now let's move over to the rotation. And PvE and PvP basically work the same way. So then for your rotation at the beginning of the fight you want to use the Q 3 times. Then we use the W and then your E skill. Then from here I assume that the damage will be coming your way, so we use our R skill and resistance potion if needed. And then when you actually start receiving damage where the enemy uses his E skill, then you want to reflect it by using the D skill. And then lastly, if you ever need to chase or escape the enemy, then use your F skill. So now let's see what we did in this rotation. But first, while using Q 3 times, we will do damage from medium range and get 3 stacks. So then we use our W skill, which will increase our damage, do damage and purge the enemy. So then we use our E skill with the max stacks, which will do insane amount of damage. And then finally for our rest of the skills, we can use them depending on the fight, as all of them are defensive skills. So we can use the R skill and resistance potions preemptively, while the D skill is meant for more outplays with the reflectability and etc. So then in my final conclusions, this build is very cheap and low level friendly, as most skills you don't need high levels to unlock, and all of the gear pieces are not artifacts, so you can keep hundreds of times using this setup and outplay the enemy mobs or the other solo players. And then finally, for the last third build we have the bow, and as you can see, all the best solo player builds have either way medium to long range skills, because when you're by yourself it's important to keep distance and have the ability to run or catch the enemies at any moment. And this way not only you can win 1v1s but as well survive and escape enemy groups, or just overall do insane amount of damage in dungeons and against open world mobs. So then moving over to the build, and for the weapon we want to go with the bow. So for your Q you pick the first option, then for your W pick the second option, and then lastly for your passive go with the second option. Then for the helmet you want to use the hunter's hood and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for chest armor go with the mercenary's jacket and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for shoes go with the guardian boots and choose the second ability and second passive. Then for your cape you pick the Thetford cape. And then lastly for your consumables you want to go with the poison potions and dead water eels too. But then for alternatives specifically for PvE, so if you don't care about killing players or escaping / chasing them down, then for the bow I would go with the first W skill. And then as well, depending on what you want to do, you can change your guardian boot skills. So we want to use the second option for medium to close range fights and to receive some healing regen. So I would use it mainly for PvE farming and some open world content. But then if you specifically want to do group PvP or 1v1s, then pick the third option, because this will make your character huge and double your health for few seconds after activating the skill. So this will basically give us an extra defensive. So as I said, the best 1v1 builds are versatile, so you can get 100% performance depending in what events you are participating. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I will show you the best way to play this build. So for the first Q spell we have the multi-shot, which will shoot this cone of arrows dealing AoE damage and pushing the enemies back for few seconds. This skill is great for damage and cancelling the enemy spells. Then our W skill is frost shot, which depending on what direction you point it at, it will fire an arrow, which will knock you back and do physical and slow damage to the enemy. And we can use the skill in two ways. So if the enemy is right onto us and we need to escape him, then we can point the spell at him and this will push him back for 13 meters and do damage and slow him. Or on the other hand, if we are chasing someone down, then we can use the skill by shooting it on the opposite direction and this will push us closer to the enemy by 13 meters. So we have this double use. Then our E skill is the enchanted quiver, which when we activate it, it will give us 50% attack speed and damage increase. But if we are close to an enemy, it will actually decrease our damage. So as we are a bow player, we want to keep our distance. And then lastly, if we press the E skill, in few seconds it will give us a quick dash, and 4 more arrows will be enchanted. So if we are quick, we can get even more damage increase. But usually the way it works that is when we activate the skill, and then we just spam auto attacks for the highest damage possible. Then our R skill is Bloodlust, which after activating will restore our health each time we damage the enemy. So it's great to combine our auto attacks from the E and then with the R skill. And then lastly we have the same D and F skills, which are the same like in the previous build, so I won't repeat myself again. So then moving over to the rotation, and PvE and PvP work the same way. So then at the beginning of the fight we wanna use our Q skill and keep poking the enemy with the auto attacks. Then if the enemy starts coming closer to you and committing to the fight, then we use our E and R skills, one after another one. And then from here we just keep on spamming auto attacks till the skill effects run out. And then from here we can use our W and F skills to catch or run away, and then lastly we use our D skill when we see that the enemy is about to or has just used his main damage abilities. So now let's see what we did in this rotation. But first, while activating the Q skill and using auto attacks, we already can start doing damage before the enemy has even come close to us. So then when he's in our normal range, then we can activate the E and R combined, so we get to increase our damage and attack speed, while at the same time for each hit receiving health back. So then we can spam auto attacks to get as much damage while our buffs are active. And then finally we use the rest of our skills defensively depending on the fight. So then in my final conclusions, this bow build is amazing for solo players who enjoy range combat and the ability to keep running away from the enemies or do consistent damage while on the move. So if you're looking for a fun and overpowered bow build, then here you go. So with that said, I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback or other good Albion online builds that you would like to see in the next video, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content. With all of this said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in my next video, so take it easy, peace.